as I've told everybody in this room, and so many of you are my friends, and I appreciate that so much, that I really haven't prepared this. And I kind of did that deliberately because in some ways I wanted this to be like going on a ranger-led tour with me. And generally when I do those, I just set sail and talk about what comes to mind. So I'm going to do a little bit of that today. I also really value the fact that I'm with a, dare I say, slightly older crowd than maybe sometimes when I'm doing tours for like kindergarten classes and things like that. And it's actually true. They do have short attention spans. So when I'm out there, often I'm just trying to get as much in as quickly with a lot of bells and whistles. But with you, I feel like I can actually just sort of slow down a little bit maybe and share some stories. I promised Mike I was going to bring all these different things. I was actually going to bring a wooden telephone booth from the War Memorial Building that I managed to get. They were actually going to throw that in a dumpster once upon a time. It was right after that building was declared a National Historic Landmark, or was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. It just sort of sat there for a long time, and then at one point the public phone was no longer necessary, so they decided they were just going to get rid of the entire phone booth itself. But I said, well, since this is on the register, I think we probably ought to hang on to that. So we removed it from the area it's at, and it is currently sitting up on the stage at the War Memorial Building. Now, I don't like to just say we shouldn't do things and not propose solutions. So one of the things I've actually been thinking about when I thought I was actually going to cart that all the way over here for you to look at is, wouldn't it be neat? Because again, it's missing the phone on the inside of it, but it still has the stool and everything. Wouldn't it be great to kind of keep it exactly as it is, but set up sort of a high-tech system where you could listen to maybe stories of people who participated in military events? And I know the Historical Society has all kinds of recorded tapes, information. The online collaborative might be a great partner, but I think it would be great to have that phone booth back up and running somewhere where you could actually sit down and actually listen to maybe people's reminiscences about their time with military service and things like that. I don't know, it's just an idea. I guess my main goal as a dumpster diver or archivist is to try and just hang on to things as much as possible rather than get rid of them. Again, I was going to bring all these different bits and pieces out of an archive. I've got about, I think, and I can't go any further without acknowledging Renee Smith down here, who is an amazing volunteer. He's much more than that, but volunteer for the city, who came into my orbit not that long ago, but has done amazing things for the city, but really has spurred on trying to really take this archive to the next level. We've involved the city clerk's office. We've got some Ron and Betsy, these wonderful volunteers from the Conservancy, have been coming over and helping to catalog what we have. But I think when all is said and done, we're going to have about 50,000 pieces of ephemera that we're going to be able to hopefully sometime digitize so that they're available to you. And there's all kinds of things from just really sort of pedestrian, not exciting things that still need to be preserved to some really fun, exciting things like my great colleague Susan Lowry Mendoza is here, and we found in the bottom of one of her desk drawers Harry Wegeforth's original drawn-up lists of the animals for the San Diego Zoo from the end of 1916. So it's pretty neat. It has 58 animals on it, and I still love it because it says on there porcupine, burro, crocodile, 3 deer. I mean, it's just this crazy little list of 58 things, and who would ever have believed that would eventually become what we now think of justifiably as one of the great zoos in the world. So again, not everything kind of rises to that level. Maybe the most famous thing that we actually did get out of a dumpster, at least it was a recycling dumpster, so there's that for it. And that was one of the original Samuel Parsons plans, the first plan for Balboa Park that he had actually sent to George Marston. And it was actually addressed to George Marston, and it actually had some of his handmade corrections in it as well. What I always am amazed with that particular document that is now safely down at the clerk's office is that it was only 18 pages long. So the fact that you could essentially write a really beautiful, almost poetic document about the park, and that, I know we are finishing up some other Parks Department plans right now, and those are going to be in the hundreds, if not thousands of pages, and some of the last master plans for Balboa Park completed in like 89 and 91 respectively are well over 400 pages long, so it's kind of amazing. I'm going to do this talk like all of my talks where they sort of are meandering, never linear, and circle back on themselves, so I'm not even going to apologize for that because I think that's how we all take in history, and maybe what we all love about this park so much is that it doesn't just go in one continuous linear fashion. It kind of goes in a line, and then amazingly it will jump back on itself, and then maybe it meanders down another path. But if you'll indulge me, I'd like to do a little bit of that. I brought 3 props instead of the 476 I originally intended to bring over. And you can't see them, so that's okay, because I also encourage, if you have nothing to do later on in the day, please stick around, because I'm going to be here and I'd love to share stories and reminiscences, and also you'll actually be able to see these pictures. But this thing that you can't see, this little black and white picture, is a picture of my father and I the first time I ever came to San Diego and the first time I ever came to this park. We were petting a deer, and it's in September of 1960, so it was a few days short of my 2nd birthday. And that's the first time I ever came to Balboa Park, and I absolutely loved it. There is another picture that shows me sitting on the back of a Galapagos tortoise. And they let you do that back in the day, and this was in the Children's Zoo, and the Children's Zoo was probably only 3 years old, or a little over at the time. Just 2 weeks ago, this is how things kind of circle back on themselves, leap forward and whatnot. James Tobin, this wonderful news presenter, weatherman from the most popular television morning show in Australia, or so I'm told, was here doing a live broadcast back to Australia on Saturday afternoon. It was Sunday morning, and we went around live, and I had the great pleasure of getting to accompany him on a couple of his spots. Every 15 minutes he'd do a live spot. The last spot we did was actually over at the zoo, and they had us come down to the Galapagos tortoise exhibit. And they were like, if you want, Ranger Kim, you can come back over here and leap over the thing. And they had all their camera equipment and things like this, and I chose to sit back, and I said, you know, I better keep an eye on this. I don't want this stuff to disappear, because they also had told me that, you know, some of the tortoises have been here like for a really, really, really long time. And I was absolutely convinced that one of the tortoises that was kind of lurking kind of saw me and said, yeah, that's right. You were on my back 59 years ago. Don't think I've forgotten that either. So he was coming at me, but slow, because they're slow, but he was coming at me nonetheless. So I said, no, I'll stay here and I'll watch the camera equipment. So I didn't go inside, but the reality is that may actually be true, that some of those tortoises, because I believe they do have a tortoise there that's 132 years old, believe it or not. So it's pretty amazing what they have there. But so that was my first visit to the park. We didn't move to San Diego until right before it was September of 1963. It was actually right during the week when the hottest recorded temperature downtown was ever taken, 111 degrees. So I'm thinking, this is great. Couldn't we have gone to like Gila Bend or Barstow or, you know, I mean, that would have been just as nice. But it turned out that was an aberration, and we loved it. And so here I was, a San Diegan, and so I started doing things like coming to Balboa Park an awful lot. 1967 was a year that this illustrious group that is hosting us here kind of came about. And it was also the year that I really began a couple of things that perhaps led to me ultimately doing what I do now. I sort of started collecting things in earnest. Like most kids my age, I was collecting die-cast metal things. I did bring a trash truck, incidentally. So this is from 1967. This is a matchbox car of a trash truck, which I've kept in pretty doggone pristine order. That's one of the good things about collecting, being an archivist, is I've always thought, gosh, you should try and preserve things in kind of good shape if you can. So hopefully that's carried over into some of what I do with what I collect now. The other thing I collected, like most young boys my age, was baseball cards. And this isn't the rookie year, but this is a Mickey Mantle baseball card. These are super, super precious, so why am I holding it and getting my dirty fingerprints all over it? Well, once again, I was ahead of my time. Everyone in Claremont, where I grew up, collected baseball cards, and they all put them in the spokes of their tires and that sort of stuff and wrecked them. I didn't. I was kind of fastidious with them, just like with the cars. It's like, I'm going to keep these. Not because I was thinking they're going to be worth a lot, just because I just want to keep these really great. Well, Claremont, as you know back then, if you're from San Diego, was just rife with all kinds of crime and terror and murder in the streets. No, actually it wasn't, but there were little thieves among us. Some of my little 7, 8, 9-year-old friends were constantly stealing baseball cards. So I, being the incredibly smart person that I was, said, you know, I've got all these incredibly great baseball cards. I'm going to take a green ink marker, and right up in the corner, I'm going to put a little slash with a green ink marker, so I'll know it's mine. And then if it shows up in Tommy Hernandez's collection, I can confront him with direct evidence. No one ever took any of my cards. Years went by, decades went by. And at some point when I was paying off some of my college debt at UCSD, I'm like, man, I've got those baseball cards. I didn't collect them because they were worth a lot, but God, they're worth a lot now. I've been reading things, they're worth a lot, and I've got a ton of them. So I went down to a baseball store, and I brought them to an expert, and he said, oh my God, I mean, he sees Mickey Mantle, and he's kind of like, holy cow, he goes, oh, this is amazing. You got anything else like that? And I go, well, I've got hundreds of things like this. And he's looking at it, and he goes, what's that? That's weird. What's this green thing up in the corner? I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe ink marker, maybe, I don't know. Well, that's not a problem though, is it, right? He goes, well, this card might be worth like, he's getting out things, he goes, well, this one's probably worth like, I don't know, $690, but I go, well, what is it with a green mark on it? He goes, about 30 cents. I go, what? And he goes, yeah, what idiot would have done that? And I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know. So it turns out that I had, I don't know, thousands of dollars worth of cards that were now worth about, I don't know, $43 maybe, down from, I don't know, $56,000 or something like that. And again, it just kept going through my mind. What kind of idiot would do that? So if anybody wants a Mickey Mantle card, here, I've got one right here. The last thing I've got from 1967, that same year, is a picture of my sister and my dad and I at Yosemite National Park. And we used to love to go camping, but the first national park I ever went to was Yosemite. And I got to hear ranger talks and things like that, and they really had a lasting effect on me. But I sort of decided at one point that maybe isn't what I'm going to be doing professionally, even though in 8th grade, when you take one of those tests and it says what you might be good at, the number one thing was actually park ranger, but then I just completely discarded that. I went to ultimately UCSD. I thought maybe I was going to be a film director, but in the beginnings, it was going great, and then I got an internship to work at one of the local TV stations, and I came in, signed up the paperwork, and they were doing a live telecast that day, the noon lunch hour news, and they invited me into the control room to watch it and said, why don't you just stand back by the camera there, and you can watch the news. It's going to be on in just a few minutes. I go, God, this is going to be great. And man, I'm starting here like next week. This is going to be super awesome. So Susan Farrell was, some of you may know Susan Farrell, really tall, elegant, commanding woman, was doing the lunch news. She was seated, and in those days, the way the teleprompter worked, it kind of fed through a screen in front of the camera, and it was like a kind of a Mylar plastic thing that fed so you would read as the news was passing in front of you. So I'm standing next to the camera, and at one point, the news is going, God, this is going to be so exciting. This is great. Camera starts feeding, and all of a sudden it's jamming up, and the Mylar thing is all compressing, and she can't read what it says in front of her. And so she just kind of freezes like a deer in the headlights. So usually someone's going to cover her and make something up. She said nothing. She just sat there as the thing continued to cover. And so they had about 25 seconds of dead air, which is really something you don't want in the television world. So I could see at the control room the director saying, break for commercial, break for commercial. So they go away to commercial. And then the lights kind of come up in the studio. And Susan Farrell just, there's like fire coming off of her and things like that. And she's kind of scanning the control room, and she looks over and she says, and I can't really say what she said, because she sort of like, they used to say how a stevedore, like a longshoreman talked or something like that, but it was basically like I'll describe some of it and then I'll bleep myself, I hope here. But she goes, God, I have said it over and over. Don't let the interns feed into the thing. How many times do I tell you? Interns don't feed the... And there I am, standing next to... I'm the new intern. And I'm like, no, it wasn't me. I didn't say that. I'm just like shaking. So they resumed, and I never came back. I actually quit my internship. Then and there I thought that the television world was too pressurized and it wasn't going to work out for me, so boop, I left. So then I was faced with a dilemma. I had been volunteering here at Balboa Park. I started actually at the Museum of Photographic Arts when it first opened, and I did some volunteer work there. And then I came in and was on staff for a little while, and then I kind of just went around to different museums and worked at various museums for the next few years, working on the exhibits design teams. In fact, one of the last things I got to do is right outside this building, if we go out and see that Friedrich Schweigart Four Corners of American Democracy statue that's out here. It had some bronze damage on it, and it was taken and removed for some time, and the Historical Society had been helping kind of take care of it. Glenn Wharton was a really famous arts preparer that had been working on it, but in the last few months, they got me to come in and just do a little tiny touch-up on the bronze work. Finally, it comes time to reinstall it, and it had actually been out of its foundation now for almost a year. And so we came over, there was a scaffolding erected around it, and the idea was, okay, let's put this baby back into place. So we got up there, just the two of us, it's really heavy, up on the scaffolding, put this kind of super bondo down, and set the thing down. And he said, Glenn Wharton, is it facing the right way? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, it doesn't seem like it's facing the right way. And I go, well, I don't know, I wasn't here when it was removed, but you've got pictures, right? And he's like, no, not with me. And I go, well, crap, that's not good. But I remembered that the Historical Society had a lot of things in their archives, probably including this thing. So I drove as quickly as I could in this ratty little Toyota pickup I had, went back to the back door there, got into the archives, and went, oh my God, we've got it wrong. So we drove back over. I go, it's wrong. The thing's completely wrong. Well, all this stuff is starting to set up now, all this, and it's on there. So him and I got up on the, and you know, it's kind of that figure that's, you know, kind of doing this. And so we got on either side, and I'm like, and then, okay. And set it back down. It was 90 degrees wrong. So if we hadn't have had the archives over the Historical Society, you would be mooned by that statue because it would be the butt that would be facing you every time you came into the room. So, see, I tied this all back into the archive. See how I did that? I don't want to keep you here like, and I know, and you don't want to be kept here either, but there are so many wonderful stories to share with you about just collecting things. I'll give you just a couple more because I know time is of the essence here. Before I started formally collecting things on behalf of the city, like I'm sure many of the rest of you, just purchased some things because some of you probably remember they used to have a city store downtown, and they would take things like old street, the old city meters and signs and all sorts of stuff, and you could actually purchase leftover things. Well, I got down there and I thought, man, I was told this is one of only 2 of these signs left anywhere in the city. And I go, this is going to be important. And what was that sign? It was the sign that was at Black's Beach. And it said, swimsuits optional beyond this point. And for a brief period of time, San Diego had the only legal nude swimming beach in America. As I know you've heard Welton's wonderful conversations, we're also generally recognized as the only exposition that had an authorized nudist colony. I often thought that perhaps when Pete Wilson got kind of spurned and we didn't have the convention here, the Republican convention, and he came up with what we all know is now the city's thing, that it should have been America's nudist city instead of America's finest city. But in any event, there have been this history of nudism going on in the city, and so I still have one of those signs sitting home in my my garage right now. I used to have it up in my bathroom because I thought it was a really funny joke when you went in to take a shower, but it's there now. Again, this is meandering and aimless, but that's okay. But I do want to conclude with a story that, again, ties in some weird way because of my collection of the sign that's in our archives, and I'm going to donate back to the city again, but also with this ongoing fascination I seem to have now with nudism, or nude people. Early on, my great boss and friend Casey Smith is out here, and I don't know if he was my senior park ranger at the time. He's eventually going to be, there's people here that are amazing. A former director, somebody that's going to be Stacy Lomedico, who I love. Casey Smith, who's probably going to be a director of our department, which again, I have something that I've got to keep now. I've got to rip the patch off of the very shirt I'm wearing because our department is now the San Diego Parks and Recreation Department, not Park and Recreation is this. So we're gonna have to change that logo. But he was my boss, I believe, when early on there was a radio call. One of the things we do a little bit of everything. We do crazy stuff like hopefully some entertaining and enlightenment like this. We do a little bit of resource management as park rangers. We give tours. We keep people safe. But we also do a tiny modicum of law enforcement. Not much, but we try and support PD whenever we can. And one day I was out driving across the bridge and a call came out over the police radio, which I'm entrusted to monitor, that kind of monitors everything happening in the central area. And the dispatcher came and said, "We have a nude male running southbound on 5th Avenue from Calmia Street, waving a meat cleaver in his hand." And so I started driving across the bridge to assist. And in about 30 seconds, what I always assume and I hope was a young officer came on the air and said, "Do we have any further description, any more information?" And I always remember thinking, has our city gone that badly that there's that many nude men running down 5th Avenue with a meat cleaver? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, mine's auburn haired. I guess we were looking for a redhead. It's like, I'm just like, if you see a guy with a meat cleaver and he's nude, pull him over. That might be your guy. So sometimes we're asking too much information, I guess, of things. And I hope that this hasn't been too much for you to bear. I know this has to, Mike's like, how did this have anything to do with the subject you were invited to talk about? Here's the caveat, I guess, for that. I did bring some actual archival things because some of my family, unfortunately, I've got family that have been passing away recently, and they have left me troves of things, some of which have to do with my family, but some are just sort of random things. So I have a whole bunch of postcards from 1900 that were collected in various places, a few in this country, but most in Europe, by people that really weren't related to me at all. And I just didn't have the heart to throw those things away. So I've kept a whole bunch of them over there. They're on the piano. So if you're here afterwards and would like to see me, I'd like to give one of those to each of you here. And what it is also is going to be kind of a calling card so that you can come back, and that's sort of, I feel like Oprah here. You get a car, you get a car. No, you get a crappy postcard. But that crappy postcard entitles you to come back and visit me and say, hey, can you take me and my family on a tour of the park? Or can we come up and look at the archives? I'm scheduled to be working for about another year and 8 months or so for the city. So if you want one of those, I'd be happy to give you one of those. And all you need to do, and they'll tell you how to get a hold of me, or I'll put it on one of those cards. And then I can take you for your own tour, show you the archives, and show you all those things that I didn't want to lug all the way over here, but we can go out and look in the boneyard or something like that, look at some of the architectural remnants that are sitting around. We can look at the 50,000 things that are sitting up in my office. Or like I say, just go on a tour somewhere that you haven't been, go in the basement of this building or something. Anything you would like to, you've got, again, about 22 months or something for that. And thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for everything that you do to help keep this place we love so much up and running. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and a pleasure to be friends with so many of you. Thank you so much.